and we'll be moving to the second panel discussion that we'll be having with non-government organizations about language for a just world, how international non-government organizations use language to help others.
Hello, Max.
Hello, Inge.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us on time. And it's time for the second panel discussion, right?
Yes, it is. Are we already live?
I think our panelists are joining, so let me take a few seconds to introduce you to the audience. Inge Boonen, VP of Sales and Consulting at Nimdzi, will be moderating the second panel discussion. So thank you, everybody, to joining us. And it's time to start, right?
Excellent. Yes, thank you, Max. And yes, welcome all of you to this panel discussion. As Max said, the title is Language for a Just World, How International NGOs Use Language to Help Others. And we've got Lucio Bagnulo here from Amnesty International. We've got Barbara Scottu at Oxfam. We've got Stella at Translators Without Borders. And we are waiting for a fourth panelist to arrive, who is Dr. Gaya. Let me please read this name here, Dr. Gaya Gamhewage. She's the head of learning and capacity development for WHO's health emergencies programs. And I am assuming that she will join us just in a couple of minutes. So while she is hopping on board, I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves. So we just do a short round of introductions. And so, Lucio, I'm gonna kick it off with you. Could you please tell us who you are, what your position is at Amnesty International, and also a little bit of, even if people probably know this, but still, what is it that Amnesty International does?
Yeah, thank you, Inge, and hello, everyone. I'm Lucio Bagnulo. I'm Amnesty International's head of translation, and together with my team and our extensive network of freelance translators, we successfully endeavor to provide high-quality translations to our entire organization. So I think, as you were saying, almost everyone knows Amnesty International, but if I had to sum it up in a few words, I would say that it was founded in 1961 by the British lawyer Peter Benenson, and over the past 60 years, it has imposed itself as the largest international NGO and a truly global movement of 10 million people campaigning for a world in which everyone can enjoy the rights enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and other international human rights standards and instruments.
Thank you, Lucio. And what about you, Barbara? Tell us a little bit more.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Inge. So I'm Barbara Scottu. I work for Oxfam as the Senior Translation Coordinator. So if you don't know Oxfam, it's a international NGO. It's a confederation of 20 NGOs that work together to fight injustice and poverty. So my team, we are the translation team for the British affiliate for Oxfam Great Britain, and we also work closely with the International Secretariat that also has translators working in-house there. So our service was created about 10 years ago to provide the organization with translation, with high quality translation, and manage centrally the translations needs for the working languages that are French, Spanish, English, and Arabic. We manage internally those translation requests, and we work with an external pool of freelancers for any requests that we cannot manage in-house. So we also, on the top of project management translation, we do proofreading, we also offer guidance for colleagues on translation best practice. Let's say for anything that doesn't fall into our remit, we will give our colleagues some guidance on, how to handle a translation request in another language. Let's say for the local languages, for example, in countries where we do not provide a language, we can help them find the best resource.
Nice, thank you, Barbara. And I think I will come back to those questions of how many languages you translate into and how your setup looks like. Thank you. And yeah, Stella, same question for you. What do you do at TWB and what is it that TWB does?
Hi, yeah, thank you, Inge, and hello to everybody today. My name is Stella, and I'm Head of Language Services at TWB, or Translators Without Borders. And so a little bit about the organization, which many of you may have already heard of, but we were founded in 1993 by Laurie Fick, and with the aim really to help NGOs with their translation needs by connecting professional translators to the NGOs with a community-based model. Fast forward, 28 years or whatever, 10 years ago, we were approved as a 501c3 status, which means that we are a charitable organization based in the US. And really, even though we're called Translators Without Borders, I think what is what not so many people know is that today we go way beyond translation, and really our focus is on effective communication, particularly to vulnerable populations. And so we do that by supporting NGOs and UN institutions with language services and support, but also with our research and advocacy work and with our international programs, which are based in country or remotely, in the case of the COVID-19 pandemic, responding to humanitarian crises where there is a need to communicate in local languages. And we also are focusing on language technology, the development of both data sets and also solutions for language technology for marginalized languages.
Amazing, Stella. Thank you so much. And I'm going to do a shout out to the organizers here. It seems that Dr. Gaya is an attendee. She needs to be promoted to the panelists. It might appear she might look like she is attending as Wisdom House. So I don't know if you guys can help us with making that happen. In the meantime, and there we are. Hello.
Hi, I'm so sorry for the technical glitch.
Sure. We made it, so that's most important. And as you were an attendee, I think you know what the question is. We are wondering, what is it that the WHO does for those people that don't have a clue, and also what is your role at the World Health Organization?
Thank you, Inge, and thank you everybody for having me. I'm Dr. Gaya Gamhewage, and my job is with the World Health Organization, and I'm head of learning and capacity development for health emergencies work. So I'm not a translator, I'm not an interpreter, I'm a medical doctor. And why I'm really pleased to join this conversation is through our learning work, our training work to help people in health emergencies like in the COVID-19 pandemic, we are translating on a massive scale the basic guidance and the training that frontline health responders, that volunteers, that decision makers can use to manage the pandemic. So I come from it at it from a learning point of view. And I have colleagues on the call from our openwho.org platform. And on this platform, we've been able to be very fast as the pandemic progressed. Actually, late January last year, we offered the first course in English, but today we have nearly 5 million learner registrations on the platform. But the amazing thing is we have 44 languages. So we have material available, not just in the UN languages. And as an intergovernmental organization, we have 6 official languages. So our official documents are anyway translated into from English into French, Arabic, Chinese, Spanish, Russian, and I'm going to get in trouble for not remembering the other one. English is the other one. But we realized, for example, those 6 are not enough. And we needed Portuguese because we have many countries that are low and middle income who need material in Portuguese. But the pandemic has allowed us to really increase that, because there is research that comes from colleagues on this panel, like the Translators Without Borders, that show that people really grasp, understand, comprehend information when it's in their mother tongue languages. And it was in fact Translators Without Borders who introduced us to this capability. They helped us set it up. We've grown since then, and we're really committed to translating material into local language. And it's really part of giving access to health education for all.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. And yeah, Stella, I'm gonna go back to you, and you already touched on it, but could you tell a little bit more about the different types of content that you translate? Because I don't know that if we always realize how much content there is to be translated, and also in how many different language combinations you actually translate.
Okay, yeah. So first of all, just before answering that question, I just wanted to touch on the fact that when we say Translators Without Borders, really we're talking about our amazing community. And today we have 60,000 community members who actually cover, well, thousands of different language pairs. So we have this amazing resource that we can tap into. In terms of the content, because we are because of our mission to help the most vulnerable, and also because we work with a community model, it's very important for us that we focus on community-facing content and also content that is going to be used by humanitarian workers or health workers. So really the information that is needed to allow people to be able to help others, but also to allow people to be able to help themselves. And so that's our main focus. But in addition to that, we do a lot of training content. We do a lot of communications. We also do advocacy. We do a lot of focus group discussion, translations to get feedback from the communities and interviews with communities. So then also transcriptions. And last year we translated in 219 language pairs.
Wow, that's an impressive number. How does that look like at Amnesty International, Lucio?
Yeah, I mean, the number of languages is not as impressive as the one Stella has just, mentioned. But for an NGO like Amnesty, is still impressive. We translated into 54 languages last year for a total of 8 million words, more or less. And many of these were actually no mainstream languages, like Tagalog or Romo, Hausa, and so on and so forth. In terms of content types, we translate any type of material that the International Secretariat teams, our colleagues produce. So that can be a research report or campaigning material, internal governance documents, papers, media and social media content, MOOCs, toolkits, anything, really, anything. Sometimes we also translate court or trial, extracts or documents, financial documents. So as you can imagine, the perfect translator for Amnesty is a very versatile one, and someone who really, needs to devote a lot of, to the learning curve, and doesn't give up, because you really need to be ready to to approach any kind of material. So in general, there is no really, there are no virtually no limitations on the possible target languages, as this is dictated actually by the impact and the target audience Amnesty is trying to reach out to, or is trying to influence, really.
That makes sense. Yeah, thank you, Lucio. And I think at Barbara, at Oxfam, it looks a little bit differently, right?
Yes, I mean, I can relate to what Lucio just said in terms of content. I'll come back to that in a minute, but our language is a bit different. We created our policy and decided on the languages that our team would focus on based on the organization's need and where we work, the regions we work on, and what languages are spoken the most. So our working languages are English, French, Spanish, and Arabic. And so that's the remit of our team, of the internal Oxfam Great Britain translation team, and then also of the freelancers that we work with. Outside, like I mentioned earlier, obviously some teams do need translation in other languages. For this, we will provide guidance and help them source the best resource for that. That also applies to any other linguistic need, like interpretation, for example, which we do not provide in our team, but we can help our colleagues to identify the best resource. Now, in terms of content, it's quite varied. Makes the job extremely interesting, and we do learn a lot. We work on issues that can go from climate change to health issues, like at the moment with COVID, gender issues, tax, justice, water and sanitation. So that is related to all that Oxfam does, because Oxfam works on humanitarian issues in emergencies, conflicts, for example, but also on longer term issues with its development work. Then our team also help all the teams in the organization that help Oxfam run, like HR, legal, or the IT team, for example, which requires another set of skills, of linguistic skills, sorry. So yeah, the list is quite long, and the documents, goes from a policy report, campaign report, social media, like Lucio said, the social media content for a campaign. It can be, a contract, HR policy, e-learning. It's a very long and interesting list.
Yes, absolutely. And could you tell me a little bit more, Barbara, about how the pandemic impacted your work? Did you need to prioritize some type of content or some type of languages?
Yes, so when the pandemic hit, obviously our workload increased dramatically, suddenly. So like for every crisis, we have to readjust. It became from one day to another our top priority. And so we had to make sure that with the resources that we have within the team and with our freelancers, that we could provide rapidly, really fast, the translations that were needed, and with the highest quality, obviously, always. The pandemic came with a whole new terminology, which is something that takes some time to work on and to agree on, with the French. For example, for me, I was, because I'm a French native, so I work more on the French terminology. So we had to agree within the different French speakers how we were going to translate this terminology. And with the emergencies, we have to deliver so fast that terminology is always a bit left aside, and we will come back to that on later, which always creates some inconsistencies. So we had to work on different levels, respond very fast to the demand for our program, mostly for the humanitarian programs teams. and make sure that we were delivering the highest quality.
Thank you, Barbara. And Lucio, did you have the same challenges that needed to be addressed?
More or less. My team is a networked team, so we are pretty used to working, remotely and sometimes at home, etc. So we didn't really, adapt to that extent because we were used to it. Although, being at home, you have to adapt somehow, to other, people living with you or all the rest. So in terms of activity, translation activity, we saw an increase when the pandemic, when there was the breakout of the pandemic. We translated a lot more. I mean, usually when it comes to a pandemic, health crisis, etc., one may think of a humanitarian field more than human rights field. So I wanted to point out something. I mean, so even when the crisis is not a man-made crisis, so a natural disaster or pandemic in this case, etc., it can usually be understood also as being a human rights crisis. This is not only because people's enjoyment of human rights is adversely affected on a mass scale, so right to life or right to health, right to housing, for example, but also because other human rights abuses typically ensue as the government response often is characterized by discrimination, neglect, obstruction of aid, etc., etc. So we did translate a lot of government recommendations or recommendations to governments for this health crisis, for this pandemic, but also at Amnesty we focused on providing support to people, I mean, affected by the pandemic, in the sense, to let them know what their human rights were and how the human rights could help them. So we translated a lot of that as well, like MOOCs and toolkits, in order to help people, acquire this knowledge and then use it in the best way possible.
Yes, it really feels like education was around the virus, let's call it like that, was really, really important. So I'm gonna ask Stella and then Dr. Gaya to elaborate a little about that.
Yes, so for Translators Without Borders, I think last year was really, we actually said that it was also a crisis of information or misinformation and disinformation in the early stages, as much as a health crisis. So we were kind of felt like we'd been catapulted almost into this quite an important role in needing to react very, very quickly to respond to the misinformation. And the way to respond to misinformation is by identifying where the information gaps are and then being able to create the right information to address those information gaps, and then obviously to get that information into local languages. I think one thing that I didn't mention before, but is interesting, is that in terms of the 4 organizations here today, TWB, we don't actually create our own content. So we are working with other organizations to spread their content and make it accessible into other languages. So in order to respond to the pandemic, we were working very closely with other organizations such as the World Health Organization, but also the International Federation of the Red Cross. And then I think around 70 organizations we worked with on COVID translations, COVID language support, whatever that might be. And we also, during the pandemic, we were able to accelerate a couple of new ideas that we had worked on in the past, but suddenly they just became much more urgent and much more relevant within the context of the pandemic. So we, a year ago, actually, it's almost exactly a year ago, when we started to do social media monitoring in Asian languages initially. So we were working on a project with 12 Asian languages. We were doing social media monitoring, and then feeding that information back to the risk communication and community engagement working group for the Asia Pacific region, so that then they could use that information. And then the other things we worked on, started to compile almost immediately, was the COVID-19 terminology resource that we began to work on. And then that project grew throughout, has been ongoing throughout the year, and today we have 59 languages available in that resource. And again, as much as possible, we try and get the content validated by the experts, whether it's the World Health Organization, International Federation of the Red Cross, because we are not the experts.
Of course, yes, that makes sense. And Dr. Gaya, yeah, could you elaborate a little bit, you as the head of learning at WHO, how important it was for you that content was translated in several languages?
Thank you, Inge. Yeah, really interesting conversation by the others, and I can see, how it takes so many perspectives to achieve this goal of getting information to the most vulnerable. So for us, even before the pandemic, we really focus on equity. So really, Lucio, the language of human rights. People have a right to health, and that cannot be fulfilled unless they have a right to education and learning, and right to information, and people have a right to information. They also have a right to participate, and language is a barrier to participation for decision-making, shaping response. Emergencies are experienced at individual level, household level, and community level. So if we keep emergency response forever in global languages, English, French, Spanish, and we cannot communicate with, and I'm not talking about disseminating, communicate with people at community and household level, we're not going to address any pandemic. So I think this is something we have understood in emergency work. And that's why I think the COVID-19 pandemic allowed us and gave us an opportunity to act on this. So before this, we were translating it into the international languages, but never on this scale into local mother tongue, right? So I think the opportunity is always there in an emergency. What we've learned with COVID is you need to grasp opportunity. It must be based on a value system, right? It's really based on values. It's not transactional. It's not just, I need to translate this for this. No, it's really based on a value system, and that human rights gives that value system. And the third is you have to have scale and scope and speed. So WHO is coming out with new guidance, right? Every week, every 2 weeks, and it's also being updated all the time. And we are generating content, packaging it into learning and translating it. Now, to do this on a global scale, Hey Newton, who runs the Open WHO platform, told me this morning we translated with the help of some of the people here, but also through volunteers, crowdsourcing from countries, 7 million words into 44 languages, right? And of course, lots of people use the English, lots of people use the Spanish. There is one language that I want to point out here, sign language and Indian sign language. So somebody from India, from that community, came to us and said, yes, you're doing other languages. What about us? And it's about addressing vulnerability, right? So we worked with them, and this pack in sign language is used by 18 million workers in the community, addressing people who have this particular disability. So you see the power of language is much more than transactional. It's really going towards fulfilling people's rights. But it's also practical, because if the frontline worker doesn't know how to stay safe, prevent infection, then we cannot control this. I mean, I'm looking at some of our courses, infection prevention control course, eProtect course. One is in 21 languages. The second one is in 16. And if you take the introductory course to COVID, it is in 36 languages, right? So if we are fast and we're value-based and we can do this, and we couldn't do it just with professionals like Translators Without Borders, we worked with other translation industry. Some gave us pro bono services. But what happened was somebody would say, we need this in Bahasa Indonesia. We will help you. our team in the countries, and we have teams in 155 countries, they validate not just the translation, but that the content quality is there. And so this is how we've been able to do it. But I must tell you, it's very fragile. We don't have systems that allow us to do this all the time going forward. So this has been a great opportunity, a great period of growth. It's sort of like the Wild West at the moment. But I think it's really important to be in this webinar to look at also that, you know, how we can do this in more predictable, more systematic ways, getting further and further into communities, but also listening back. And Translators Without Borders is doing that, not just translating one way. They really are trying to listen to what communities are saying.
Absolutely. And I have a couple of questions popping up. One is, until now we mainly spoke about written translation, so I would like to hear, if we talk about equity, also about whether you engage in spoken translations, let's say, interpreting, or also sign language. And then afterwards, and depending on how much time we will have, I would also like to tackle the quality topic and see in what way maybe because times had to be, turnaround times had to be really quick, so maybe you had to speed up a lot. So in how far did you presumably sacrifice quality? And then if we can, we will also speak about technology. But let's first talk about being inclusive and also providing interpreting and possibly sign language. I believe, Barbara, you said before that you don't offer interpreting services.
So our team, as in the translation team at Oxfam Great Britain, we do not do interpreting. We do not offer interpreting services. However, we do know that the service can be required for some teams, and they can come to us, and we will direct them, you know, towards some providers that we know we have been working with for some time, but this is not something that we manage directly. We can give some guidance and make sure that our colleagues know about the best practices, and we'll find the best resource for them.
Excellent, thank you. Lucio, what's up at Amnesty International?
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify, I mean, I work within the Language Resource Center of Amnesty International, and I oversee the translation part, and my colleague Patricia Combo-Bonalac oversees, she's the head of interpretation. So we do have, you know, interpretation, and they have, I mean, extensive pool of pro bono interpreters. So these are professional interpreters who donate their time and their skills to Amnesty. I mean, most of the meetings are internal. There are some external, etc. So interpretation is provided and is needed as much and is as important as translation for Amnesty. We do not provide sign language interpreting yet. Maybe in the future, why not? I mean, we are all for inclusivity, really. So, but for the time being, it's mainly, you know, the two core services are interpretation and translation.
Thank you. That makes sense. Stella.
Yeah. So again, TWB, we don't provide interpretation services at the moment. Really because of, you know, trying not to spread our resources too thin. However, having said that, we do train interpreters in the field. So we provide introductory training courses for humanitarian interpreters. The reason for that is that in humanitarian contexts, when the international NGOs arrive, they typically hire local bilinguals to be their interpreters. And these individuals don't necessarily have the experience or training as an interpreter, so they don't know the basic practices of interpretation. So our course is, the aim of the course is to provide a basic training so that we can make sure that the interpreters in the field are following some basic practices. And we've trained over the past few years, I think, several thousand interpreters. Then in terms of accessibility, one focus area that we have is around plain language and the importance of writing in plain language to make sure that people can understand content. And often plain language is considered as something that's maybe only relevant for people with a low educational background, but actually that's just not true. There's no reason why any of us ever need to write with big words. We were all trained to do this for some strange reason at a university, to write in an overly complicated fashion. But really what we're trying to advocate for right now is to try and keep communication as simple and effective as possible. So not oversimplifying, it just needs to be the right language to get the message across as effectively as possible. So we do a lot of both advocacy and practical work around that. And then finally, the other area where we've been increasing the work that we do is around voice and audio. So in the context where we work, Northeast Nigeria, which is a low literacy context, we developed a tool called Scottu Speak so that we can deliver audio translations together with the text translations. And again, this isn't something we were necessarily asked for, but based on our research, we realized that there was no point us getting these written translations out into the community if nobody could understand them. So we started to record as standard the written translations that we do, and we just deliver them as a simple MP4 audio recording, and then they can be broadcast around the camps. And we also do a lot of radio work in Northeast Nigeria. Likewise in Bangladesh, Rohingya, which is an oral language, so we have had to adapt standard translation processes to account for that. And also we're trying to develop voice technology, so gathering voice data, again, for marginalized languages. We can't compete with the, your Alexa in English, but we are trying to develop real world solutions, very simple voice-based technology that can be used in the field.
That's fantastic. And when you talked about plain language, for me, that was a great segue back to talking about quality of the translation process. And I was wondering, did you get rid maybe of some steps in the process just to be able to deliver on time, while at the same time you've been saying that terminology had to be correct and content had to be validated by institutions like, for instance, the WHO. In your case, Stella, can you tell a little bit about what is your definition of quality in the end?
Right.
And then I'll ask Lucio, Barbara, and Dr. Gaya.
So quality, that's a fun topic, right? Because I mean, I see that the question was particularly in the context of volunteer translators, but we also need to consider that many of our volunteers are actually professional translators, senior translators. So the way that we manage this is that it's a managed community that we have different levels within the community. And so we will always have a more senior translator who's revising the work of a more junior translator. Within the COVID context, it was also a question of turnaround times for us. So we did work with some partners who were concerned about both quality and turnaround times with the community model. And what we have increasingly been doing is we already have around 20 language leads internally. So for all the key languages that we work with, we have an in-house language lead who is providing quality assurance and supporting the community for those languages. And then, so they will always be involved in the quality assurance process for those languages. Then for other languages, we have been working with external paid language leads, and so that we have this hybrid model. So we're doing community translation, and then we're having a professional review as well. And then for other languages, we are relying on our own quality processes for the community translation. So again, we work with volunteers, but with the different levels, and then the quality assurance processes that we have, checking against the terminology. Then those are the processes we currently have.
Thank you, Stella. How does that look like at Oxfam, Barbara? And did you skip some quality checks?
So quality for us is extremely important. It is not something that, we want to compromise on. The team was created 10 years ago when some research was done within the organization, and we realized that the need for translation was huge. Oxfam is an international NGO that was created, after the Second World War. It's big and it has a long history, so you can imagine the need for languages. And we realized that there were huge issues in terms of quality levels. It could be something really good or something really bad. That the practices were also very varied. The staff, lacking time and resources to deal with translation, would translate themselves, use Google Translate without too much checking behind. So we came into the organization. The team was created to bring that professional knowledge in. We are all trained translators. We all have, we all have that background, and we also, we created the strategy. We created guidelines. We hired a professional pool of translators. And so slowly we saw the quality improving with all this, working with professionals, making sure proofreading was done, and working on terminology ahead as much as we can, because again, terminology is probably one of our biggest issues because of the lack of time and resources. So we try to do that, as well as responding fast to our colleagues' needs. So yes, quality, is extremely important for obvious reasons. The communication, the external communication, we have to communicate effectively and provide the best quality for Oxfam's work on campaign, on on policy work, research. Also, the communication has to be clear for the people that we work with. So yes, we make sure that we deliver the highest quality. We also use some we use the CAT tools also for consistency, and making sure that we are all aligned on the same terminology. And for example, if we update a HR policy, we will use the CAT tools to make sure it's consistent to what we've done before. We also work a lot with experts. As I mentioned before, the topics that we work on are so varied. We ask our colleagues in the field to help us check the terminology or check what we've done. We will talk to colleagues, our engineers in water and sanitation, some that are specialized in tax. So we have this very rich, organization in terms of knowledge, that for us, the translation team is really, it's a great resource. So we work with them closely to make sure that we deliver the best for them.
Thank you. So it's a combination of professional translators, good terminology management,
collaboration,
the use of technology, and also experts in the fields. So Lucio, at Amnesty International, I'm sure quality is important as well, but what is your definition of quality? And does that depend also on the content type and the impact that that specific piece of content needs to make?
I mean, to us and to me, quality, it's not just a post-translation process, but it starts at the very beginning with the recruitment of the translators. As I was saying, we work with professional translators mainly. The International Secretariat, so the Language Resource Center, because then we have sections like affiliates for Oxfam, and sometimes they do, look out for their translators, etc. But for us, So it starts with a very tight and very strict recruitment. Sometimes, I mean, of course, with the more strategic languages, it's kind of easier, like, you know, Spanish, French, etc., because there is a culture of, you know, professionalization to universities, etc. But when we have to translate into Oromo, for example, that's another story. And it's a fascinating story because we have to, of course, not only, you know, find a person who understands English or the source language and it understands well. And we have also to consider that many of the human rights terminology and words and terms are non-existent, or sometimes, you know, when it comes to a right to or you know, sexuality or etc., those are taboo words, and that's quite challenging. So many times it's not a translation, but it's a rephrasing, etc. But we have to be careful at the same time because there is a reputational risk for Amnesty, you know, or there is a risk for the also for the rights holders if something is not, you know, translated appropriate, I mean, accurately. So what we do in those cases is to partner with either with our own colleagues in regional offices or with partner organizations in the field, on the ground. Or sometimes we try to reach out to some university if they have, for example, a course on language course, not just translation, but it can be depending on where, you know, on what language we are talking about. It could be maybe linguistics. And not just, you know, translation, because translation, it doesn't really exist as a topic. So we try to basically partner with others and to little by little to actually identify this potential collaborators, translators. Maybe they're not professional translators, but we try to accompany them in what could be called as a learning curve in order to become our trustworthy human rights translators. So it's a very long journey. That's why I was saying we have to, you know, translators have to be patient because we give a lot, but we also ask a lot. So we try to balance this out to give the best conditions ever, or to abide by, you know, many international translation, you know, association, you know, the rules. So we try to really to put there our best, to do our best to make them feel part of the family, so that they stay with us. And actually, you know, I'm very happy because we have been working with some translators for over 20 years. I mean, even before I, of course, started at Amnesty.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's great. And so, Dr. Gaya, what are the quality expectations at the WHO? And before you got involved with translations, did you realize how complex a translation process can be?
It has been a steep learning curve. I totally agree. So quality, what does it mean? I agree with all the speakers about translations and the quality that we do for our normative work. So we have very professional translators. We have interpreters, because that's in the United Nations. You cannot function without that. And it was already difficult to agree on 6 languages that suits the whole world. And we also, we go through quality when we, in that kind of high level translation quality for normative work. But I want to challenge us here, because during a pandemic, you have to balance that precision and accuracy with speed. So if you take too long to get information to the field, your outbreak is out of control, people have died. The objective here is to save lives, protect the vulnerable, and stop or slow the transmission. That's the objective. So as a public health person, I come with that objective. Now then we see how can translations help us. The other balance that we have to go is with the language and communication. So what is enough, fast enough, that could help save lives, protect the vulnerable, and stop transmission? So that's a question I have to answer from a programmatic point of view. So even translation of our learning materials and others into the official languages where we have professional translators, it's too slow. We've had to go outside even for that. How do we manage quality? We go to the countries which have requested those languages and ask them to double check both the content, because quality for me has to have content, and the language together. So that is best done as close as possible to the field, not where I am. So my team, Heini Utunen and others, they have I don't know how they do it. It seems like artificial intelligence, but it isn't. It's her human intelligence that allows this to be done. You will find my team members actually formatting courses in languages they do not understand, right? So it's really been very hard. The quality also has to be linked to how people understand, so their culture. We have to take into account behavioral science, right? Neuroscience, adult learning, right? The impact of color, impact of font, impact of images, all of this has to come in, because ultimately we want to communicate and engage, not translate. Translation is a tool, right? Language is a tool. So my job is to keep pushing and make sure we communicate, but also increasingly listen to what people are saying. We ask everybody to wash hands. 40% of the world's population do not have access to safe water and soap. So this is a real rubbish recommendation. I'm sorry, right? It's absolutely rubbish. And then we have new terms that only epidemiologists knew, but now we have communities talking about flattening the curve, epi curve. We started saying social distancing, and then we realized that's wrong. It's physical distancing, right? So this is a ship we are sailing as we're building it. So that is why I have to take decisions, and colleagues have to take decisions on how much we balance accuracy with impact, right? With communication. So during an emergency, we have different criteria. Of course, the perfect world is you have perfect accuracy, great translations that are contextualized, and they come really fast, right? But we're not there yet. So we are having to take decisions all the time. Also, just about the different services we give. So interpretation is very important, not just for our meetings. When we go to investigate a disease outbreak in a community, we do rely on local interpreters. And as Stella said, that the training they do and others do for this really increases the impact of what we're able to do. And particularly when you're investigating something, when people are suspicious and they don't trust you. So that's that. Sign language, I've already talked about. This has been really one of the most touching emotional things that have accidentally happened. Really, I really didn't think about it. It accidentally happened, but I feel very proud. All of our learning materials, we are thinking about visual access, so there are guidelines to help people as much as possible, to access it. We produce a lot of audio. And particularly if you take Africa, they really prefer audio files to the written. And also just to say, I mean, we have, for example, in Africa, we have 10 material in 10 local languages. But I'm afraid there is a challenge there because maybe people don't know about it. The uptake is not as much as I had hoped it would be. So we also have a challenge. We may have translated great material, but people may not know about it, or they don't feel comfortable with it, and they're not accessing it as much as they are in the internationally established languages. So that's a long way to say. I want to say that quality is great, but the ultimate quality is about saving lives.
I deeply apologize. I could not allow myself to interrupt you earlier, but I have to. I also have a very small mission to save the time. So, Inge, yes. It's time for us to wrap up, unfortunately.
Yes, there were a lot of questions by people asking how can we contribute. I believe, Max, that you are going to pull up the websites of the different organizations that are here, unless I'm mistaken.
This is something to ask my colleagues, but I'm sure that we will organize something.
Yes. We can definitely organize something. I believe that we can also answer these questions maybe separately by sending an email. Maybe
I was just told that yes, we can do it. So
Okay, great. And so, yeah, to all the attendees here, sorry, we really wanted to give you the chance to ask some questions, but at the same time, these panelists had so much great insights to share that I wanted to give them the opportunity to speak as much as possible. So I guess we have to wrap it up here, Max.
Yes, just appreciate the panelists, and Inge, thank you very much for moderating this panel discussion. It was really great having you with us today, and we hope that you will stay tuned and keep listening and watching, because we have many speakers coming soon.
Thank you,
very much.
everyone.
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Thank you
you.
very
Bye.
much,
Bye.
and we
Bye.
appreciate great mission everybody of you have. So
Thanks for
Thank
involving us.
you.
Great.
Thank
Bye.
you.
success with all your endeavors. Yep. Thank you very much.